Hello and welcome back to the Faith and Culture Show. I'm Catherine Camp, your hostess for the show. Today we have a returning guest, and I'm very honored that he would take more time out of his busy day and all of the projects that he does and services that he does for our country. He is a retired Marine and has worked in many different aspects of, I guess, looking at our constitutional republic. So I'm going to bring him on so that we can understand a little bit more why we need to get busy. We're going to have a conversation. And if you saw the first show, I would like you to please, this is an invitation to write down any comments, reach out to us. GR would like to have a conversation because there's a lot going on, but you can get involved. You can help bring this republic back to its original intent. As we're finding out, we have really lost sight of what we stand for. And I'm so glad for what President Trump has put in place in the way of Doge, because it's really revealing a lot of mismanagement of our taxpayer dollars. And today we have, I think you've probably guessed it, is J.R. Mobley, and from Reclaiming the Republic. Welcome back, GR. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to try to share your screen for your website whenever you're ready.
Okay, we can do that. Let me, you made some comments, so yes. let me place some context. One of the things I start my show off with, because I have an educational show, and I always start off reminding everybody that debt is fraud. There's a lot of conversations about China owning our debt, and they own all sorts of property and so forth. And the reality is they don't. They may own fake debt, but the United States government can't spend money on things they don't have the authority to do. In other words, we gave them very specific powers to do very specific things. If they go and do something they don't have the authority, then it's fraud. And so when you look at the majority of the things they spend money on, Department of Transportation, most people go, no, I mean, they can do that, right? No, we had 3 presidents veto congressional attempts to create just the footings to allow the federal government to tax us and improve highways and waterways. And so they don't have the authority in the Constitution. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, literally told Congress that power doesn't exist in that Constitution, and you've got to amend it so that we can actually properly do this. If not, at any point in time, even if the states let you do it, it's still a violation, and it will always be a violation. So when I say that debt is fraud, and you look at how much money we actually spend on a fiscal year basis, the majority of the money actually, if you look at what we bring in on revenues, this is probably the best way to say this. We bring in about $2 trillion on taxes from us, we the people. What they spend on constitutional things is far less than $2 trillion, far less. So the majority of all that money that they spend in taking our tax dollars and now taking on debt is on things that they don't have the authority to. And as a matter of fact, this started way back, even before Wilson. This started actually in the 1800s when they actually said, you know what, we're going to have a rainy day fund and we're going to use money to do this. And as nice and benevolent as it is for a government to be able to come in and, fix people and pick them up and dust them off after a good hurricane, tornado, or what have you, as nice as that is, they don't have the authority to do that. The states are all the sovereigns, and the federal government, if we look at the Constitution as a power of attorney, and if everybody understands a general, I don't know if I covered this last time, but it's important to reiterate, a general power of attorney gives them the ability to do anything to their discretion. I mean, it's up to them if they want to spend it, do whatever they want. If it's a general power of attorney, they have a limited and defined power of attorney. There are no general powers within that Constitution. And this was reiterated and reiterated through the ratification debates. So how did we get here? Well, because we became so illiterate, they've actually been getting away with, and I hate to say it, but they've been getting away with murder. Yeah. So if we go through, we can actually prove this. If you actually go through the expenditures on a year-by-year basis, you will find that an astronomical amount of money is being spent on things they don't have the authority to do. And so what do we do about it? Well, we have to hold them accountable. And so the way to hold them accountable is by using First Amendment petitions and so forth. And I think I pointed to my website as a national repository. So we can go to the website right now. And I believe I'm sharing my screen, so you should be able to see this. Is that correct?
Right. Let's get that up. Yes.
Okay, so that's my website. And I like to think right. So my site menu is over here on the right. So if you want to actually start learning about the Constitution, we have some constitutional articles and we have some constitutional minute archives. These archives are the old messages I used to send to your state legislators. The academic source documents, these right here, I call it the proverbial horse's mouth, but this is exactly how these are the ratification debates right here. It's our copy. And if you actually look at any of these ratification debates, you'll realize that we formatted them for you and we've color coded them so that things jump out and you go, oh my gosh, that's what they really said. And so knowledge is power. And because we're, I'll just say, so illiterate, because they've deliberately dumbed us down regarding the Constitution, that they get away with doing anything they want to do. Anyway, so if we go down, and this constitutional counties is kind of dead. There's nothing there. But if we go down to, well, this is where my, that was fun, but this is where my radio podcasts are. And so one can go there. But if you want to look at the constitutional arguments, this is the national repository. And we actually have all of the petitions that we've got already ready to go right here. In other words, you can download by just clicking on the little button, but these are PDF documents, but these right here are easily plugged into your county and your state. You'll notice the red. We've got Benton County in Missouri that basically we framed this for them. All we need to do is give you the Word document and you put in your county and your state and you're ready to go. We've done this so that all of these constitutional arguments are First Amendment petitions for the redress of grievances go to your county commissioners. And these right here will actually, they're long-winded. And I know that your county commissioners they're going to want to hand this off to a lawyer. And bottom line, if they do that, they're abjugating their responsibility. See, we have a Republican form of government, which means that our representatives is our government, not the courts. If we had a judiciary form of government, then the courts would be, where we would go for everything. And isn't it interesting that everybody goes to the courts today for everything? So
we're seeing that happen right now. Now,
yes,
if I could just interrupt quickly,
go ahead.
TR, are they using our tax dollars to go to the courts? Like to fight off Doge and them coming in and looking, opening the books so that the American people can see how the money has been spent and where it's going. They're, like you say, they're taking it to the courts.
Yes. So let me go back to
go ahead
this.
And get that off.
Right.
So are they using our tax dollars to do that?
Well, so actually, they've set this up. The Bar Association and the courts have actually set us up to where that's where they make millions of dollars. They want everything to go through the courts because who makes money on everything going through the courts? The judges courts? And the lawyers.
The judges,
right?
Yeah.
So that's how it becomes a money mill for them. And we can, it's not dead. We can appeal and we can appeal. And every time they just reach into your pocket and take more. Technically, just to be clear, the court cannot create law. When a court actually makes a ruling, what the ruling is whether it is or isn't in the Constitution. In other words, I'll give you a case. There was a case called Maryland v. McCullough, and John Marshall was the Chief Justice. This was, I think, 1819, something like that. And this was a lawsuit where actually the federal government basically went after Maryland because Maryland was trying to tax the national bank. First off, the national bank was unconstitutional, but they put this building in Maryland. And they said, okay, you know, we're going to give you this bank so you can come to it. Well, okay, Maryland started taxing it. And they said, you can't tax the federal government. This is a necessary and proper function, and it's untaxable. And so what ended up happening was Marshall actually made some rulings. And in that ruling, he basically said that the government is supreme in all things that they think is necessary and proper. And in these rulings, Madison and the rest of the framers really didn't say anything. Why? Because he was correct. You couldn't tax the federal government. There was no ability for the states to tax the federal government. But the opinions that actually had been glorified since then have become case law and precedents. The Constitution doesn't allow for case law and precedents. In other words, the fact that they create opinions is interesting, but they should just be burnt up because they have no relevance other than that that's what the judges were thinking at the time. And technically, when you really look at how they've been using opinions to actually stretch, bend, and twist our laws, a good case in point, in Baker v. Carr, and I want to say it was Reynolds v. Sims. Those are the two cases in the 1960s. And this is where this principle came out where one person, one vote. In other words, they wanted to equalize the power of the vote of a person so that all persons' votes were equal throughout the United States. And so what they did was they created this principle so that they could change every state government. The courts changed every state government from their county structure, governments we created, and said they don't count anymore. You're going to have legislative districts. And they literally converted our Republican states, our Republican form of government states, into democracies, because legislative districts are balanced out so that this is how population centers get more votes and more representation. And it gives them the advantage, political advantage. And the federal government, or I should say the Supreme Court, had no role, responsibility, or power to do what they did. And the states literally bowed to them and said, okay, we'll do what you tell us to. And
so, okay.
Go ahead.
Please keep your spot there.
Okay.
We need to hear from you. Mm-hmm. We hear democracy, democracy, democracy. Mm-hmm. Oh, we need to save our democracy. Our mm-hmm. democracy is in trouble. You know, that's all we hear these days.
Okay.
What
so democracy
is the difference between democracy and a constitutional republic?
Right. Well, so actually, we're a hybrid constitutional republic. The constitutional republic means that we have a constitution that is our laws. We don't have a governor that creates laws. In other words, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. In the British monarchical republic, because they had a republican form of government, and they had parliament, and the parliament actually represented the people in two different ways. There was the Commons, the House of Commons, and then there was the House of the Lords. And so there was representation for people in parliament, but they had counties. They actually had small parcels of governing land, and they did not have any recognition for the governments that those people created. When we broke away from England, we actually changed the paradigm of government, because right there in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson made the axiom that governments are created by men. And today, going politically correct, governments are created by we the people. We the people create government, and the one government that we actually create is our counties. We don't create the states. The state delegates actually went to a constitutional convention, and they created the state constitution of the state government. And so when we look at the state and its architecture, where the counties were the relevant parties to that compact, it's what the Supreme Court did to the counties. The reason they never did this, so what they did was they wiped out a framework of government and just basically allowed these boundaries to flow based on where the population is. And so Why did the Supreme Court not apply that to the states so that states would have equal representation, or I should say, the people of the states would have equal representation? Case in point, Wyoming has 500,000 people and they have one representative. So 500,000 people actually have basically the voice coming from one person. Now, when you look at all of the other states, it's almost 750,000, almost 1 million people are being represented by all the rest of the representatives. Why did the Supreme Court not actually wipe out the states as well and say, hey, one person, one vote, to make sure that everybody had equal representation? Because they knew if they would have touched the states would have screamed bloody murder. And actually, I believe the progressives, because this was in the 60s, the progressives had already absconded with most of our government by this point in time. And they were already wanting to go towards a democracy. Now, a democracy is mob rule. In other words, 50% plus one. When we look at our federal constitution, it takes 3/4 of the state to make that change. In other words, the framers put checks and balances to make it difficult for changes to occur, right? So you have to have 38 states buy into an amendment for that to actually change. Now, why is it that every state in the union uses democracy today in changing their constitution? In other words, 50% plus one. Well, not all of them. I think there's 2 states that actually don't, but almost all of them have invoked democracy. And that right there is actually a violation of the Constitution, because in Article 4, Section 4, it says the United States shall guarantee to each state a Republican form of government so that they won't be tossed to and fro by by the volatility of democracy. Because that's what they knew. They knew that the worst and the least stable government was a democracy, because you'd be constantly tossed back and forth from anarchy to despotism, because all of a sudden when, they start starving, they say, well, this is our priority. Feed us, and then do this. We're just chasing our tails when we allow the mob to rule us. And so when we actually look at why we actually have a hybrid, we don't have a single constitution. Every state has a constitution. So we're a hybrid constitutional republic, because the federal constitution only covers very few things in our lives. It technically doesn't cover healthcare. It doesn't cover energy, labor. It doesn't cover housing. It doesn't cover the environment. They don't have any power to do all of that. I mean, I could go on and on. Look at the Department of Interior. They can't possess all of the land that they possess today. The only land that is enumerated in the Constitution is forts, arsenals, magazines, and dockyards or shipyards, and then needful buildings. That's it.
So
go ahead.
Okay, so this is where they really shouldn't be in charge of parks and I guess wildlife preserves.
That's correct. That is correct.
At the county or the state level.
That is correct.
This is our land, this state.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so even less do they have the right to give away our parks to the United Nations and let the United Nations run it. That seems even worse.
So for them to be able to do that, they would have to have an amendment to the Constitution giving the federal government the discretion of being able to transfer lands to foreign entities that are within states. Because see, once a state is stood up, the only land that the federal government truly possesses is the seat of government, the District of Columbia. When you look at Article 4, Section 3, that's where the states are admitted. And this is the only place where it mentions territories. And if you look in Article 4, Section 3, the very first part of that part of the Constitution is Congress shall have the power to admit new states into the Union. And therefore, that means that they need a little bit of responsibility, because I have a color-coded constitution that goes through the enumerations, and I sent you a color-coded constitution that highlights all of the violations. When you look at this red, you go, wow, that's being violated. That part of the Constitution is being violated. The other constitution that I have, and I'm working through it, I'm actually cleaning up. I told myself I'm going to get this done, because when you look at the Constitution and somebody looks at the very first line, and it says that Congress, or I should say, all legislative power herein granted shall be vested in Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Is that delegating power? No, it's basically the responsibility of all lawmaking is vested in Congress. It's not a power. It is identifying where that power exists. And the powers that are actually listed in this is in Article 1, Section 8. And then there's all these powers that are enumerated. So when you go through Article 1, and there are 10 sections in Article 1, 1 through 7 are either roles, responsibilities, or standards. And a standard is like, to become a House of Representatives, you have to be 25 years of age, and I think a citizen for 7 years. And I think for a senator, it's 35, and I think maybe 10 years for, I'd have to look it up, 10 years for citizenship. So those are standards. Does Congress have the power to change that? No. It requires an amendment to change any of that language. They can create law regarding taxation. They can create law regarding bankruptcies, regarding a naturalization process. As a matter of fact, they're charged to have and to establish uniform rules or uniform laws of bankruptcy and naturalization. So they can create laws to do that. They can't create laws regarding their representation. Remember, I said Wyoming actually has 500,000 that's one representative. If you read Article 1, and I believe it is Section 2, which it is, it'll actually tell you that Congress, one representative in Congress cannot represent any more than 30,000 people. How is it?
So we would have to have a lot more representatives.
Yes, as a matter of fact, well, so because of the shenanigans of at the federal level, the federal government has actually brought in or allowed illegals to come here. And it was Jimmy Carter in 1980 that said, when we do the census, we're going to count illegals and we're going to count them for apportionment. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at our numbers, we're about 330 million. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you that we probably have easily 50 million illegals in America. Now, that's not, hyperbole. Yale and MIT in 2018 did 2 surveys. They both did their own studies, and they both came up with 22 million illegals hiding in the woodwork. And I'm here to tell you that because they're progressive schools, I mean, they're flaming liberal schools. The point that they created 22 million, I think they're suppressing some of that, but that being what it is.
That might be half of what there really is.
Right. So when we look at how many people come in, because you don't know what you don't know. If we have no idea who came in, then we're only guessing. But the Center of Immigration Studies believes it's well over 40 million. And I say we're probably closer to 50 million.
So I did hear that in the 2020 census, they use that to disproportionately put representatives with it. We have way too many representatives in some areas that are heavy on the migrant population, immigration population. And
yes,
they really shouldn't have that.
So let me share this with you, because California lost 11 million, or I should say 11 representatives. And that's because of so many people leaving California. And if you really look at California today, there are that many they actually have illegals serving in office.
Wow. Aren't there rules for that?
Yeah, there are. Yes, there's the law. Right. Absolutely. So what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. You want to show us what you have?
Okay. So what are we going to do about it? Well, so the whole point, before I get to that, I'll go back down to that. So folks, as Madison stated in, I think it was the 10th Federalist paper, he pointed out that the political power, that we the people are the fountain of political power. Because if we create a demand, if we create a movement, I'll give you a good case in point. There has been an amendment to the Constitution driven by we the people. And it's, when we look at all the amendments, as a matter of fact, the majority of the amendments to the Constitution actually came from the states. The first 12 amendments, which 11 of them have been ratified, those all came from the states. That wasn't concocted by Congress. And when we look at the 11th Amendment itself, that was another one. The 12th Amendment was Congress, but I think I went through it, and we've got probably well over half. It's like 17 or 18 of the amendments are driven from the state. But when we look at the Prohibition Amendment, the Prohibition Amendment was driven by the old days mad, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, right? Because it was a moral problem in society that they said, we got to clean up our drinking. The drinking is just too bad, and we got to make that hard liquor illegal. And so they gave us the Prohibition Amendment. Now, when they created that Prohibition Amendment, they created the FBI, or actually they empowered the FBI, because the FBI was created beforehand. Okay. And they had no power to do that because they don't have any criminal jurisdiction. In the Constitution, the only criminal laws that the federal government has the ability to prosecute and define and so forth is treason, counterfeiting, crimes committed on the high seas, and crimes committed against the laws of nations. So when they added prohibition, alcohol, now they could create this large police force. So they had the FBI sitting there, and then they really empowered them to actually go, and they created the ATF as well to go after alcohol. So they had this huge police force. The Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, and I think it's subsection 14, basically says that the Congress shall have the power to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union. Well, what does that mean? Execute the laws means enforce. So they never amended the Constitution in the Prohibition Amendment to take the responsibility away from the militia to enforce the laws. Now, have you ever heard of the militia ever enforcing the laws?
No, but I've heard of threats that, we're going to have martial law.
Okay.
Is that the same thing?
Well, so yeah, usually when the militia is deployed, as a matter of fact, this was in the ratification debates, in the Virginia ratification debates. And if you want to test me on this, you'll find it on June 14th, 15th to 16th. Those days is when they talked about the militia, martial law, and all of that. And they actually set the parameters on what they can declare martial law for, because it was George Mason that said they could just declare martial law willy-nilly and put us all under martial law. And Madison and Nicholson said no. Nicholas, they both said no way. They can only declare martial law where the militia is being deployed, and while they're deployed, they cannot maintain martial law indefinitely. It is only to serve and not necessarily protect, but to create a governing body over the militia. But anyway, when you look at the power to execute the laws of the Union, you ever heard of the Whiskey Rebellion?
Yes.
Okay, so Congress created a law back in 1792 that they were going to tax distilled liquor, just kind of like this Prohibition Amendment, right? Did they create an ATF? No. Did they create an IRS? No. Did they create an FBI? No. What did they do? They exercised the Constitution. Congress called forth the militia, and they actually marshaled the militia from Virginia, I think it was New Jersey, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, and they marched into Western Pennsylvania and arrested 24 men. Those men were tried, not on the criminal bad behavior, murder, or anything like that. They were tried for treason because they were basically, I will say, riotously fighting the law of the state. In other words, they considered that treason. And 2 men were convicted of treason for protesting. And today the court tells us that you have a right to go out and protest.
Yeah, yeah. And
what happened?
Your government, which is, we have the right to do that. Okay.
Well, actually, no, we don't.
We don't?
We don't have a right to go out and protest. Okay. We don't. It's right there in the First Amendment. As a matter of fact, let me See if I can pull this
Well,
up.
what about redress of grievances of the people going to the government and saying, wait a minute, you're not doing what you're supposed to do? Isn't that legal?
Yes, but that's done by petition. I'll show it to you because I'll pull it
so
up.
there's a difference. Okay,
Absolutely.
It's a different kind of protest.
So here's the
Let's
First
take a
Amendment.
look.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. Congress shall make no law, and actually that needs to change, but at least we need in our head to say the federal government shall make no law, because the court actually thinks they can get around it because they say, well, we're not Congress, we're the court. And so we're supreme in anything we want to say. But anyway, so the federal government shall make no law respecting, and then ... And then if you read down here where it says the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for the redress of grievances. So when we petition, okay, so when we actually assemble and petition the government, I'm sorry, let me get out of this. So when we actually assemble and we petition the government, that means that we're supposed to rally right there on government property. We're not supposed to go out and deny people the rights of commerce and shut down businesses. That would be violating their civil rights. Okay. We have a right for commerce. As a matter of fact, when they shut us down to going to work and going to the store during the pandemic, they denied us our right of commerce. And
yes, so they did.
Yeah. And who did that? It was the governors. And the governors were actually making laws and enforcing laws that abridged our rights and privileges and immunities as U.S. citizens. And the 14th Amendment forbids states from being able to do that. It says, no state shall make or enforce any law. I'm quoting this because I've memorized these things. No state shall make or enforce any law that abridges the privileges or immunities of a U.S. citizen. There's no little caveat that says, oh, except in emergencies. Why did they not give the state the ability to have emergencies to create the laws to do these things? Because the states were killing people. In 1866, when the 14th Amendment went out, there was a massacre of black freedmen in New Orleans. About 200 men were killed, gunned down in a convention where they were organizing themselves politically to get engaged in the upcoming election, in the 1866 election. And the powers that be didn't want to see that happen. But we don't learn about this in our education system, but we've heard about the nefarious behavior in Oklahoma. But this was really our biggest and probably our bloodiest, because it was a massacre. In Oklahoma, I mean, people had guns and there was gunfire from both sides. This was literally a massacre. And so the states were always the bad guys. They were the ones that were taking away our rights. I mean, after the 14th Amendment, the states started passing Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow laws deny the privileges and immunities of a U.S. citizen. Oh, well, it's separate but equal. I'm sorry, that doesn't cut it. Separate but equal is protection under the law. But states cannot make any law that abridges a privilege or immunity. In other words, if I'm a citizen and this is a public restaurant, they can't make a rule or a law to tell me because of my ethnicity, I can't sit there, because they're denying me my privilege and immunity as a U.S. citizen. So the states couldn't do anyway.
So,
the fact is,
okay,
go ahead.
There's just so much.
I know it's a fire hose, but
it is. And I'm trying to stay on.
Get it. Go ahead.
I want to stay on track, going back to the fact that in 2020, our rights were trampled on, and people who stood up to say anything were censored, debanked, so on and so forth.
Right.
Many people were fired. They were, you weren't allowed to say anything. Didn't the federal government, maybe you can tell us, I'm sure you can, set things up many years ago and grant themselves emergency powers in case of an emergency or a threat?
Yeah, that was Jimmy Carter who set up FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And so in cases of emergency, they could come in and basically disband your government and create a provincial government where they would be federally managed. That's all unconstitutional. And so FEMA, the money for FEMA is all unconstitutional. That's a part of that fraud. So I'm going to go back to, forgive me, but I'm going to go back to these petitions because I want to kind of go through these. Petition number 2.
It's like, why didn't anyone say anything? Why couldn't we just tell them, go take a hike?
Well, because the media is absolutely controlled by the globalists. Yes. And they do not want anything that challenges their narrative to come across those guys' lips. Even Fox News will not cross certain lines. Okay.
Oh, I know.
Okay. So
I don't trust them.
All right. So petition 2 challenges the ability of the federal government to even create a treaty with a foreign government to adjoin to them to allow foreign laws to be used or exercised in the United States, or to even adjoin and partner in creating laws and being this new world government. That authority is not enumerated in the Constitution. And as a matter of fact, during the Constitutional Convention, there were all sorts of, these outlandish concepts that were being thrown out. And so when they actually said, hey, we believe that help me out here. We believe that the federal government is going to pass laws that actually will deny or take away our rights and so forth. And it was actually let me see, there's Mr. Nicholas, and I want to find his precise comment right here. That's preferential treatment and clarification on limitations. So in response to, I think it was Patrick Henry that says they can pass a treaty and take away our rights and actually inflict harm upon us. This is what Mr. Nicholas said in the ratification debates. Have we not seen in America that treaties were violated, though they are in all countries considered to be the supreme law of the land? Was it not therefore necessary to declare it in explicit terms here? How then is the Constitution on any different footing from the government of Great Britain? The worthy member says that they can make a treaty relinquishing our rights and inflicting punishments because all treaties are declared paramount to the Constitution and laws of the states. This is what he says now. An attentive consideration of this will show the committee they can do no such thing. The provision, the supremacy clause in Article 6, so the provision of the 6th article is that this Constitution, he's citing now, this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. They can by this make no treaty which would be repugnant to the spirit of the Constitution or inconsistent with the delegated powers. The treaties they make must be under the authority of the United States to be within their province. It is sufficiently secured because it only declares in pursuance of the powers given. They shall be the supreme law of the land, notwithstanding anything in the Constitution particular to the state. So back to this, this concept of them being able to make a treaty, they can only make treaties that are within those enumerations, i.e. they can make a treaty regarding trade because they have the power to regulate trade. They do not have any power to adjoin to any foreign government. In any type of NATO, UN, it doesn't matter. There's no alliances allowed. And so this right here basically goes through this long argument. It's 15 pages, but we go through a full constitutional argument that they can't do these things. The next one is repelling the invasion. This deals with the invasion on our southern border. And we literally go through the fact that the only thing the federal government can do regarding this invasion is to repel them. Most people think that the federal government has the authority to regulate immigration. They don't. That power is not given them. The only entity that had the responsibility of immigration and regulating it, guess who? It was the states. Because when people came to America, nobody wanted to immigrate to the District of Columbia. There were no jobs there. That wasn't a state. The federal government was just a general government to basically make standards like a uniform rule of naturalization. So everybody was copacetic, or they were going through the same processes. But the states were the ones that would dictate. They actually had the power up to 1808 for the importation of people as well. Importation means that they're not immigrating. It's not an individual that says, I want to come and live there. This is basically pulling in refugees, is pulling in, at that point in time, it was slaves. But a large body of people is considered the importation of persons. The federal government has been forbidden from being able to import people. So refugees coming in, they don't have the authority to do this, which makes those people illegal. And we're not even talking about them as invaders. But and that this goes all the way back to the UN treaties, where we signed up that we would be bringing in refugees into the United States. Let me go to the next one. This one,
wait,
I'm sorry,
right there. If we can just don't go anywhere. No, I want to see the rest.
You want to stay on that? Okay.
Okay. Right. So please. So these states that claim to be sanctuary states and pull in all of these illegal immigrants, house them, and take care of them, and put them on our election rolls as illegal people.
Right.
If it's up to the states to control this immigration, how does that fit in to all of this?
Okay, so in this petition, we really go through what an invasion is. An invasion is anybody that basically a trespasser could be an invader. They don't qualify by the size or the amount of people. They don't qualify in the Constitution, whether this is a military invasion or a cultural invasion or a political invasion. It doesn't matter. If they're coming in here unwanted, bypassing our laws, they are invaders, and the Constitution is clear. I just highlighted it. The only thing they have the authority to do is to repel invasions. That's actually said in Article 1, Section 8. It basically says that Congress shall have the law, or shall have the power to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrection. So these insurrections that were going around in all, during the pandemic, and these big, huge burned down city protests in the autonomous zone in Seattle, that was all treasonous behavior. Yes. Those people should have been arrested for treason, just like the Whiskey Rebellion. And then when you go down to the last phase of that portion of Article 1, Section 8, subsection 14, and repel invaders.
Okay,
they
but
have to go ahead.
If the states have the control over that, not the federal government, do these states have a right to harbor this illegal invasion?
No. So the states have so technically, under the Constitution, the states have the responsibility of maintaining and managing their own immigration. Maintaining and managing their own immigration. The federal government never had the responsibility, but they assumed it, again, without amending the Constitution, when we started getting overran by people that were fleeing famines and so forth. And the state said, hey, this is overwhelming. And people were just kind of landing here and then just trying to figure out where to go. And so the federal government basically set up these ports of entry unconstitutionally, but that they started managing this. And this is how they got their nose into this. This is how the camel's nose got into the tent. And so as soon as they start, whenever they assume a power, it always is under the best of the pretenses. Oh, we're being overran, so we'll stop this for you. And oh, that's great. Thank you. Unconstitutionally, thank you. And then now look at this. They've created a red carpet on our southern border to say, come on in, come on in. They were the ones using the State Department going into all of these their embassies and all these other nations in Central America and South America and so forth, and saying, if you can get here, we'll bring you in and put you on our dole. They were literally handing out little leaflets and little pieces of information, and they were helping in, guiding people of how to get here and so forth. I'm going, those people were committing treason. And it's the same thing with these governors, to answer your question. City mayors or city councils and governors that actually say we're a sanctuary city for people who are invaders, when the Constitution requires we repel them, that means that they don't sound like they're supporting the Constitution, which means that they're violating their oath, which means they're committing rebellion, which means that they should be at least removed from office that fast. So when you read Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, I think I mentioned this last time, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is how we clarify, what the standards are. The standards are for public servants, their main obligation, because this is what they actually take an oath to support this Constitution, this very specific Constitution, not the annotated Constitution, but this one. And so if they are not supporting it, well, let's cover this. So can you passively support the Constitution? Madison said, no way. You have to actively support this. And I'll use the human immune system as a good example of that, because the human immune system will attack anything that doesn't belong. And it'll basically do everything to drive it out, to basically, I'll just say, kill it and, basically expel it. The human immune system is a very active thing. When we look at passive, a wall could be a passive support. So in other words, some public servants, well, as long as I'm sitting here, I'm supporting the Constitution. Nope. You actually have to be active. As a matter of fact, a part of that support is to call out your federal public servants, or I should say your fellow public servants, because it could be local at the county level. If they're not supporting the Constitution, they're allowing things that are actually violations, like becoming a sanctuary county, sanctuary city, then they actually have to stand up and say, you're violating your oath, and therefore you must be removed in accordance with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Get out of here. The problem is we're not enforcing the law. It's right there in the Constitution that you cannot violate your oath anymore. That happened in 1866. And now nobody is abiding by their oath to support the Constitution, and they're all running a rebellion against it. And everybody's going, what the heck happened? Actually, let me take that back. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and come back to you. There we go. So the law has been there since 1866 because we, the people, are not familiar with what that says in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. We have no idea that it's there.
We have no clue.
And we have to demand that we have the ability to enforce that part of the Constitution. They have laws in every state, and these are commendable laws. They're driven by the federal government, all unconstitutionally, but they're commendable. They have a good, noble, intent. These laws basically say any person in your employ that sexually harasses or racially harasses or whatever, it creates a hostile work environment, and somebody comes to complain, hey, I've just been sexually harassed. By law, they have to take that employee that did that was accused of that, and remove them and do a thorough investigation to determine whether that happened or not. Why can't we do the same thing with their oath? By law, we can easily remove any person because they sexually harass somebody in the workplace. But we can't remove our public servants when we say, you violated your oath, when the law demands it. We don't need them to make the law. We just need them to enforce it. So
how can we do that? Do you have paperwork on that?
So it all starts. Yeah. So it all starts with these petitions. And so what we can do is I'll let your audience, if they're ready to start learning how to, but sometimes people need to understand why, where's the power? Where's that authority come from? Or, where are these, I'll just say the centers of gravity in our government. Our government is distributive. Jefferson described our government as distributive in kind because the political power flows out to we the people. In other words, the majority of the power is closest to us. because we're to govern ourselves. We're supposed to have a self-governing system. The federal government is a very limited and defined general government. They only do a few things. The state governments are supposed to be a general government in serving the counties like the federal government serves the states. But we blew that. We didn't understand, and the federal government deliberately started creating states that were these monstrosities of power, or I should say they were the footings for that. In the late 1800s, all of the Western states were actually unconstitutionally formed by the federal government because they expected the states to give them a whole bunch of land. They expected the states to basically be subjugated to the United States. That's when a state joins the union, they join one to many. In other words, as a state, if I'm a state and I'm coming into this union or this marriage of states, I'm joining with all of the states. I don't join to the federal government. The federal government is our servant. We created that creature. It's a little creature, and it only can do these things, but we've allowed it to get the genie out of the bottle.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's time people see this. And that's why I'm really happy that we can do a few of these shows together. Sure. Yeah. We need to begin to expose this, and people need to take back the authority that we have been given as United States citizens.
So I'll just go here real quick because I showed it to you, but I'll just bring it up. When we go to the map, the menu, and we go to the academic source documents, right here, you're going to find 5 critical documents to understand the what and why interposition is the only process to reclaim our republic. So if everybody goes to that page, there are these 5 documents. And actually, if you read through it, you'll notice that I give you the documents. They're all highlighted. So I kind of, help everybody understand, wow. And these are Word documents. So when you click on it, you'll actually have to right click and then save the target so that you get the Word document, because that's what you have to do with the Word document.
Okay.
Anyway, when you read through this, you'll realize that there are audio files underneath this that actually you can read along. If you don't read and you don't read along and listen, because I go through this and explain to this group exactly what those words were saying and what is happening here. Why were they doing this? What just happened? What did we just read? Because a lot of times when people read it, they don't understand it. And by reading these 5 critical documents, it'll help everybody understand where the power really is and why we have to interpose.
This is so good. I'm blown away because these are things I want to learn. I've had many people on that are working along the same lines, getting, Patriot Academy, where they're training people to understand what the Constitution is, because you are correct. We have gotten so far away from what we stand for. It's going to take work to get back on track, but it's worth it. Freedom is worth it. Freedom is not free. Liberty is not free, because there's always the oppressor who wants to control everything and keep everyone in the dark and ignorance. And that's why everyone if you're wondering, wow, this is getting real political. Well, you know what? God is in the midst of politics. God should be in the midst of government, because we are, those watching are Christian, and we are not meant to be enslaved. And we've been given this beautiful opportunity in this country to be free and to set an example for others on to have liberty and freedom. But if we just sit by and let people overrun us and take us over, then we've squandered our gift of what we've been given as a country. GR, I know we're at the end here. So, and I'm so excited that we get to meet again. So can you tell people where to find you? I'm going to put your information down in the notes so that if you're driving...
I don't want them to find me. I want them to find the content. I like not being found, but...
Okay. That's what I mean. Find your content. Plus you have a radio program. So We need
Yes.
to listen to you. Okay,
Yes.
tell us.
Yes. So we actually read the documents for you. And so it's very empowering when you actually hear what the framers say. I don't want you to take my word for anything. We need to actually hear what they said, and that's how we really can move forward, because I'm trying to create a league of statesmen. So reclaimingtherepublic.org is my primary domain, and that's really, where you're going to find everything. I have contact information there. I actually work with groups. If you're in a particular state like Virginia, we have a gentleman that actually has regular calls that are kind of mentoring calls where we're trying to help educate and get people involved in actually leading. When you mention the Patriot Academy, you can mention Hillsdale College. Anybody that's making money is making money because of the problem. They have no vested interest in solving the problem, because that's the problem is what pays them. So they don't want this is why you get milquetoast education from these types of organizations. I'm not here. I don't make a penny from this. I'm the dangerous guy in the room because I'm the ideologue that wants everybody to know the truth. And
well, you have so much information. This is where people can land and begin to get trained.
Yes.
Do you give training sessions?
Yeah. So actually for Virginia, there's a gentleman by Woody. I think you've met him, Woody K. And
I had him on the show. Yes.
Yes. And so he actually does, he hosts the calls. I come on and we talk about very specific issues, and it's a live session of learning and mentoring. And most of the people are really active in, local events and what have you. They're just active people. We need to grow this to where those people that are on those calls start having their calls to get people to understand the First Amendment petition process, how to get organized. There's a lot of people that don't think they need to know, but let me just say this. If you understand exactly why we're doing this, then it's easier for you to have buy-in. And I'm going to tell you that when people have a profound understanding, they're going to be more willing to actually die for their cause, if that makes sense, because you have that kind of buy-in. I'm not asking anybody to die here. I'm just saying that we don't have to die. We don't even have to have a bloody battle where you hear people say we're going to have a civil war. We're going to have to fight for our rights back. No, God gave us everything we needed, this Constitution, to take it all back. We have to enforce it. Go ahead.
You have a person on boots on the ground in New York upstate. Where else? Just quickly, because
so Wyoming. So we've got legislation in Wyoming that we're trying to get through. We've got a large presence in Wyoming, and actually, it's not it's the Republican Party. We've got Missouri, Georgia. So I have presence, or I should say, I have champions of the Constitution, and they're out there operating. They may say they're affiliated with me or not. I don't care. I just want champions of the Constitution. And so
we need an army, because, folks, there is the forces of evil who are just don't understand what's going on by the hundreds of thousands. Trust me, they are on Zoom calls.
So
now.
You create the army by a movement, because when people start realizing that they can't do any of these things, when you read these petitions and we prove that the Department of Transportation, Commerce, Interior, all of these things, energy, all of these departments that are created are violations of the Constitution, and people go, is that true? And they start reading these things, they have to get involved. Now, either what we need to do is we need to shift the blind trust from the Republican Party to a knowledgeable trust. They know that they can trust this movement, champions of the Constitution, demanding full compliance. That's what it's about. Because if we get public servants to be fully compliant to the Constitution, all of your problems go away. And that's not hyperbole.
No, it's not.
Right. Now, your new problem is, well, now that we're in charge, what are we going to do? Because we'll actually have our self-government back.
Hang on to it and teach others to do the same, the next generation.
Right.
I'm really, really proud of this generation coming up, and they're the early 20s. I'm seeing this huge shift to understanding, wow, we have been taken over.
Can I inject something here? Because I know you're over, but if everybody would just give me a little forbearance and patience. So it is built and is innate. It is inherent within every child to revolt. They want to revolt against their parents. Is when they know something that is new, like we actually have kids that have been revolting on lies, like this transhumanism, this dysphoria. Those have all been lies. We offer the truth. If we could get the future generations in school today to actually understand so that they could point their fingers in their educator's face and say, you're lying and you're subverting our very liberties. You're trying to lead us down this path to where we become slaves, but where we throw away our votes and we actually succumb to communism. They're weaponizing our children to do that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes. No, they are. No, that's okay. I'm writing down because I think that's going to be the title here. Revolting based on lies.
Yes. That's what they've been doing. If you remember the counterculture revolution, they actually started twisting and perverting this thing about liberty. As a matter of fact, isn't it interesting that all the counterculture leaders, the rock stars and all those people that were out in front, they look at them today, they're no longer saying government's bad. They go jump into these welcoming arms of welfare state and healthcare and all free stuff. I mean, have we forgotten what they really stood for?
Yes, we have. And that's why I'm talking to you. We need to get back to our roots.
So I'm happy to help any way I can.
Thank you. You are helping. So everyone go to reclaimingtherepublic.org and look all this stuff up. And please comment, because GR is willing to have a conversation with you to answer questions. And we're going to be talking again real soon and recording this conversation. So I would love to hear comments. So would GR. And you could go to his site, see where you can plug in. Thank you, GR. I'll see you real soon and be talking about all of this so we can get it on, I guess, in history, recorded in history.
Yeah, this revolution will be televised.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. God bless.